All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking a highly detailed brand new poll from DemosAU. You know, in Australian politics, conventional wisdom tends to set in pretty fast. We hear these narratives form, they get repeated on loop, and suddenly everyone just accepts them as undeniable fact. But today, we are looking at a set of numbers that fundamentally challenges almost everything we thought we knew about the current electorate. So let's dive in and see what's really happening under the surface.
For quite some time now, the prevailing narrative across political circles has been a pretty simple one. The sky is falling in on One Nation. We keep being told that they're totally over, that their bubble has completely burst, and that they're essentially done as a major disruptive force in federal politics. And honestly, it's an easy narrative to digest. But does it actually hold up to scrutiny? Well, this new data completely shatters that assumption, suggesting that the whole story of a collapsed One Nation might be, quite frankly, wildly premature.
So the crucial point is, before we can really talk about how the map is shifting, we have to establish our absolute baseline. 76. That is the magic number. In the federal parliament, you need exactly 76 seats to form a majority government in your own right. Keep that number locked in your head, because literally every political strategy, every single campaign dollar, and every poll is ultimately driving toward getting to or staying above that exact 76-seat threshold.
To put things into perspective, let's take a quick look at the current makeup of the federal parliament. Right now, the Labor Party is sitting very comfortably with a strong majority of 94 seats, which, as we know, is well above that 76-seat requirement. The Coalition, on the other hand, doesn't have nearly enough, trailing quite a bit at just 41 seats. And what about One Nation? Well, currently they hold just 2 seats. That's essentially just enough to share a cab to Parliament. One is courtesy of Barnaby Joyce's defection, and the other comes from the election in the seat of Ferrara. Rounding out the whole shebang, the Greens have 1, and the others, which includes the Community Independents, often called the Tiffany Teals, sit at 13. So that is the reality we live in today.
But enter this massive new poll from DemosAU. And they haven't just asked a few broad, surface-level questions. They've gone so deep into the data that they can now map out a massive what-if projection. Basically, what if an election were held right now, today? Now, as impartial observers of this data, we absolutely have to add the obvious caveat here. There isn't an election happening right now. It's 2 years away. These numbers most likely won't end up being the exact reality on Election Day. But the granular detail they've provided offers a truly fascinating look at the current mood of the country.
Now, what's really interesting about this data is how DemosAU breaks the country into 3 distinct geographic zones. It's almost like looking at 3 completely different versions of Australia. In the inner city seats, so think Central Sydney, Central Melbourne, Central Brisbane, Labor is the leading party at 31%, with the Greens actually tracking ahead of One Nation there. But shift your focus to the suburbs and the regional areas. In the suburbs, One Nation suddenly surges to number 1 at 30%, and out in the regional and rural areas, One Nation completely dominates at 41%. It is a remarkably stark geographic voting divide.
Let's drill down a bit deeper into those suburban and regional numbers because, let's face it, this is where the vast majority of Australian seats actually are. In the suburbs, the traditional home of the old Howard battlers, that so-called Tiffany Teal vote completely drops off. Instead, if you combine the Liberals, Nationals and One Nation, they are pulling a whopping 50% of the votes straight away from Labor and the Greens. And once you move even further out into the regional areas, where the Liberal Party footprint starts to fade, the Nationals pick up 20%. Meanwhile, Labor drops all the way down to 18%, the Greens to 9%, and others sit at 12%. It represents a massive demographic shift away from the sitting government.
So what exactly happens when you plug all of this geographic polling data into the actual parliamentary map? You get hypothetical shocks of an unimaginable scale. Just picture this contrast. Labor is projected to plummet from 94 seats all the way down to 68. Meanwhile, One Nation, a party currently sitting on just 2 seats, is projected to surge to 60 seats. Let that sink in for a second. It's a staggering look at how a shift in the suburban and regional vote could completely upend the balance of power.
Breaking it down impartially, party by party, here is exactly how radically this data would reshape the parliament. Labor loses 26 seats. But look at the coalition. They would lose 30 seats, dropping to an astonishingly low 13 seats in parliament. One Nation gains a massive 58 seats. The Greens would manage to gain a couple, but the others, including those independent country and teal seats, would lose roughly half their representation. If this were realized today, the map would be completely unrecognizable from the one we have now.
Okay, but before we get totally lost in the sheer scale of these projections, we need to ground this explainer with a critical reality check. As the news anchor who initially reported this bluntly stated,
I don't think these numbers are anything you can take to the bank. We really have to remember that this isn't a guaranteed, locked-in forecast to the next election. Rather, it is a striking snapshot of extreme current voter dissatisfaction. It tells us exactly how people feel right now, not necessarily how they will end up voting in 2 years' time.
However, if you strip away all the spectacular hypotheticals of who gains what, there is one real, undeniable, underlying story hiding in this data. 26. Forget for a second exactly how large One Nation or the Coalition might end up being. The main unignorable story is that the sitting government is bleeding support, and the data projects them to lose 26 seats. That is the core takeaway regarding the current administration's standing with the public today.
And this brilliantly illustrates the immediate real-world consequence. Losing those 26 seats is severe. Dropping to 68 seats leaves the government exactly 8 seats short of a majority. Remember that magic number 76 we talked about? If this polling translated to reality, Labor would be forced right into minority government. Could they negotiate those final 8 seats with the Greens and the Tiffany Teals? Sure, they probably could. But taking that specific prospect toward an election presents a vastly different reality for voters than the absolute majority that was formed just 18 months ago.
Given these massive polling numbers projecting a huge surge in regional and suburban support for One Nation, the timing of tomorrow night's media landscape honestly couldn't be better. At 9 p.m., live at the News 24 headquarters, the leader of One Nation herself will be stepping right up to the microphone.
Tomorrow night's News 24 special kicks off at 9 p.m., and they are absolutely turning the traditional pub test up to 11. Pauline Hanson will be taking in-studio questions as well as fielding questions directly from viewers all around the country. It is definitely going to make news for quite some time.
Which leaves us with this final burning question. What on earth will Pauline Hanson say tomorrow night? With a poll showing her party potentially surging to 60 seats and entirely rewriting the electoral map, she steps into that studio with more leverage and, frankly, more public curiosity than she has had in years. Will she capitalize on this suburban discontent? How exactly will she address the Howard Bowlers who seem to be shifting her way? The country always hangs off what she has to say, and tomorrow night will absolutely be no exception. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the data, and we'll see you next time.